Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan. We're at the Motor City Madmouth, and I'm joined by two Detroiters in every sense of the world. My Monday night co-host, George Eichorn. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Scott. Good to be here again on a Monday night.
And I want to welcome our special guest, John Thiede. John, good evening.
Good evening, Scott and George.
Little Detroit sports media reunion, I might say. The last time I saw all three of us together in Candy was over at the DSM Christmas party. Where was that being held?
Sinbad's.
Yeah.
We didn't need Sinbad the Sailor Man, just Sinbad the restaurant. Okay.
Always a good event that day.
Always
a good event.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I wish I could get to it more often, but I'm 1,200 miles south. But when I have an opportunity to get there, it's a great event. Met a lot of great people. John, it was good to finally meet up with you. And, of course, Bruce Made of the University of Michigan. I had a chance to spend some time with Bruce and saw Ray Lane. And I don't want to get into too much name dropping, but those are some of the people outside of the regulars that we had a good time with. So it was a good event. Hopefully I'll get a chance to go to it at some point. If not, really thankful for the time we did. We always, when I come to town, we're always going to lunch someplace, so it don't make any difference. So,
Yeah, right.
With that said, George Eichorn and I have been doing the Sports Exchange for years, right, George?
Yeah, we have. John, we go way back, Scott and I, back to the 1980s. And we first met each other at WXYZ Radio, AM 1270. And at that time, the Ron Cameron Sports Talk show was on the air, and Scott came by as a special visitor while yours truly was handling the phones and producing the show for Cameron. Scott was there as courtesy of Sam Greenblatt, who was a great hockey man, so great to the Detroit area with amateur hockey. And Scott, I remember you were the guest there in the studio, and you sat next to me as I answered the phone calls that day.
Yeah, and then he hired me. Go figure.
Yeah, you did so good as an intern that day, Scott. I couldn't help but hire you.
Hired me as an intern, became his assistant producer. Before long, I was producing. Boy, how quickly we went, faster than Indy cars or NASCARs, and boom, here we are. 40-some years later, we're still
here doing it.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're still doing it. It's a blast.
And John, of course, John, I had a privilege of meeting you many, many years back with the Detroit Sports Broadcasters Association, and now the Detroit Sports Media. Of course, Scott and I have been longtime members of that group. And John, why don't you fill our listeners in just a little bit of your background?
Yeah, sure. So I do a sports show off Comcast, Sports Talk 60, little swag there. Been with the Detroit Sports Broadcasters and now Detroit Sports Media probably since we got into sports radio. And me and Scott was talking about Ron Cameron prior to this. I used to follow Ron Cameron at WPON doing the 5 o'clock drive show, and got to watch Ron for months trying to learn a little bit. And I think that's one of my favorite things about sports media, because, you know, I grew up in that time period where you guys were covering everything, you know, like the Ray Lanes and the Ernie Harwells and all you guys covering sports. So, you know, even though I love covering the players and doing the show, I love the press box more than anything to hear all the old stories, you know, that how big the media was back then and what they would do in the press box and all these guys and all the stories. So that's one of my exciting things. And I did tell George, we're in the middle of trying to produce a documentary like on Detroit sports stories told by the media. And so far we want to do like a 2-hour broken up in 1-hour segments to do that and get all those stories before some of these guys, you know, can't tell them anymore, you know, and it's just, we got some great stories. So anyways, like I said, I do a show on Comcast. I started out on radio. I do a lot of acting and comedy too. And I've been blessed, really 2 careers. You know, I've been a fireman for 32 years and hold the rank of captain. So that's going to be ended soon, because I'm getting older a little bit, the gray hair. So I'll be retiring, but I can do sports. So I've been blessed with a lot of stuff, and I do love sports. I love Detroit sports more than anything, even though I'll sit and watch sports, but nothing like Detroit sports. You know, I grew up with my dad being a big fan, and I remember sitting in the driveway with my dad on a sunny afternoon listening to Ernie Harwell and Paul Carey do a Tiger game. There was nothing like that, you know. So I'm just happy to just be talking sports again, really. So,
Well,
Awesome.
well,
and I've talked a lot of stories with George. I mean, we've interviewed at Tiger Fest and during games and talked about the old days of the Tigers. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and Scott, can you believe he interviewed me once for his
actually, twice.
twice?
I
Okay.
got twice. Yep.
Hey, listen, if you're still at it, I'll be more than happy to come on your broadcast. All you got to do is contact me. I'd love to be
Well,
able to.
I'll probably rely on you on the documentary, at least if you can't get here in person, even do something like this on a Zoom or camera, and we'll have the editor get that in. So,
Yeah.
If you want.
Yep.
I'm here for you, John. No
Yep.
problem. Hey, just put me on speed dial, okay? Then we'll be good.
I got you. Got you right there. Yeah.
But meanwhile, let's talk a little bit of Detroit sports tonight. And we're going to lead off with the Detroit Lions and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I took the track off I-95 about 5 hours to see the football game. And I got to tell you right now, what was interesting here is watching DeAndre Swift turn TIAA Bank Field into a racetrack, because that's what he was doing, running up and down. And DeAndre Swift, 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a 54-yard gain. Reminded me a little bit of what happened 3 years ago, almost actually it would have been 3 years tomorrow, was when Kerryon Johnson ran for 158 yards against the Miami Dolphins, and the Lions only won at 32-21. So 2 young rookie running backs hitting 100 yards in their first attempt in the state of Florida. So let's talk about the Jacksonville Lions game. I'll throw a couple of numbers at you. For Jacksonville, they've given up 30 points 5 weeks in a row. They've had 5 kickers in 5 weeks, which is unfortunately a new NFL record for all the wrong reasons. And those people in Detroit don't need to know about records for all the wrong reasons, because the first thing that we'll talk about, the Lions' consecutive road losing streaks, which go on forever. Okay. And then, of course, Matthew Stafford now has gone on and thrown a touchdown pass against all 32 teams when he connected with a 1-yarder to TJ Hawkinson. So with that said, let's talk about the Lions, okay? Are the Lions messing with fool's gold? Because let's face the reality, if they didn't go ahead and win against Jacksonville, and they have a very winnable football game next week up in Atlanta, are they on? Is this fool's gold for the fans?
Well, I say a win's a win. So I was quite surprised. I think we mentioned earlier about just how probably these defenses were ranked in the high 20s. And in the first half, the quarterbacks didn't even have 100 yards, I don't believe, on each side. And I was kind of miffed if the Lions didn't win it. I would have been pretty sad, because you thought they should have went to Jacksonville and beat a team like that. I think Jacksonville was 1-4, were they? Right. And you talk about next week in Atlanta, I think they may go in Atlanta and lose next week. So even though Atlanta's a beatable team, man, our Lions defense isn't what it should be, I don't think. So, and then the new kids just get beat all the time out there.
Yeah, he is. He's still a rookie, and he's showing it. But I'll tell you what, they came up with a good game plan. DeAndre Swift, that was the man. Of course, Adrian Peterson did a nice job too. I know he only got 40 yards, but 15 carries. And but DeAndre Swift, you're right, Scott, just shades of the Kerryon Johnson, and also shades of Barry Sanders. When Sanders made his debut many years back, obviously it's way too early to compare DeAndre to Barry, but as far as a history going and scoring 2 touchdowns, no Lions rookie running back has had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in a single game since Barry Sanders. That's what I'm referring to. Matthew Stafford, steady game. I mean, not totally spectacular. 223 yards passing, only 1 touchdown passing and 1 intercept. Decent game, enough to win. But all in all, I just think that this was a game, obviously they had to win, and Matt Patricia had to win. And, without looking ahead, I'm telling you right now, Patricia, as far as I'm concerned, and Bob Quinn, the general manager, are still on the hot seat.
Well, no question about it. I can't remember yesterday's game, however, though, had the Lions controlled the tempo of the football game 180 rushing yards to 44 for Jacksonville. So I think Matthew Stafford will give up individual stats all day long if you can control the football and control the tempo of the game.
Very true, Scott. Very true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
I think Swift actually needed a game like that. He needed that breakout game. So and as a rookie, he could be stellar here. I would say if he gets the touches, he needs to work. But with the Lions right now, you bring Peterson in, and I think one of the agreements with Peterson was that they have to use him. But then there's a lot of possessions that he sat for a long time too. So I don't know how long he's going to be happy, but I didn't see a lot of even carry on coming in. So hopefully Swift gets the touches because the old days of a running back getting 30, 40 touches in a game are gone, really. Everything's a running back by committee, and you got 3 or 4 guys back there getting 7, 8 touches, and it's tough. I mean, this guy, if he only gets 7, 8 touches a game, Swift's never going to do anything. So it's important that I think they need to choose eventually who they're going to have on all these downs. So the way you can develop that kid.
Yeah, Peterson got a touchdown yesterday too.
He did.
Yeah.
And he did get a touchdown. Right, they used him deep in Jaguars territory, and Swift is what he is.
I mean, when's the last time we saw the Lions have 39 touches? You're right, running the ball. And I know a couple of them, Stafford was rushing out. He had to carry it himself. But, I mean, you're right, Scott and John. Matthew Stafford had a balanced attack. He wasn't on the dime to throw for 400 yards. Yeah. And you're exactly right. I mean, it was a balanced attack, and it was a good game plan going in. But that, again, it's just one game. Obviously, it's their second win, but it just sets up an interesting scenario for next week in Atlanta, like you said.
Well, now
I have it. Go ahead.
Well, I have a guest on here every Wednesday, Steve Ballesteri, and we talk about, he covers the New England Patriots, and he gave me the skinny on Matt Patricia. Good, adequate defensive coordinator, but he gives up the big plays. So anything that wants to tell me that Matt Patricia is a great defensive coach, I think that they need to get their eye prescriptions updated a little bit because, when you talk about the bend but not break offense, they under Patricia, they bend and they break, to be honest with you, because they do give up the big play. So
yeah, well, I mean, how many double-digit leads have they blown already this year? I mean, if you had a great defensive wizard back there, your defense gets a double-digit lead, or your team gets double-digit leads. You need that defense to hold that lead. So that's one problem that we see the Lions always having. They come back in that last fourth quarter and try to win the game in the last possession, and we can't do it all the time. So
Absolutely.
They set a record for crying out loud for how many double-digit lead blown there. So again, let's look at the infamous records that they're setting that nobody's really aching to break, and that's what you've got. But yeah, I don't think there's any question that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are on the hot seat. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, you remember once upon a time, there's a guy by the name of Jim Caldwell, and Jim Caldwell was the only winning full-time coach in Joe Schmidt, and yet you gave up Jim Caldwell, the best thing they had going for him, and this? Seriously?
Yeah. Two 9-win seasons, and that wasn't enough. No. We have to elevate. What was Quinn's famous line? John and Scott, but I mean, he wanted more wins, so we weren't satisfied with that. We got to raise the bar higher. And so Matt Patricia has not raised it. He's lowered the bar.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think we mentioned that earlier with Scott when I talked to you about all the past coaches that we had. They were great defensive coaches. We had Marinelli, we had Schwartz. They came here and became head coaches. And look at where they're back again. They're back being coordinators, with Vegas and those other teams, and they're doing a good job. But maybe just head coaching wasn't their forte. So,
wow.
And Marinelli, not Marinelli, Patricia, I don't have a lot of confidence in him. I really don't.
The best birthday present the Detroit Lions ever gave me was when they fired Rod Marinelli on my birthday. Thank you very much. Okay.
he ran out of son-in-laws, I think.
Yeah. And, of course, the other birthday present I wasn't alive to see that happen on my birthday was December 29th, 1957. They won a championship. I wasn't born. But that said, okay, I still think Jim Schwartz was a pretty good coach. He just walked into a very difficult situation, cleaning up that mess by Rod Marinelli. And if Rob Parker's listening to this broadcast, I remember I gave you a high five when you used to ride Marinelli, and he did it in Charlotte after the Lions set that those records there. Rob, listening, I give you a high five from here all the way to LA after the way you used to get under Rod Marinelli's skin. And I'll never forget that Rod Marinelli needed a travel agent, because I remember he tried to fly the Lions in to Oakland on a one-day trip, and then they got flattened by the Oakland Raiders. I don't know what his military approach was, but that was the worst thing I've seen in sports.
Yeah.
If you've taken a trip to the West Coast before, try to do that back and forth in one day and expect to think the jet lag wasn't there. Rod Maryland in LA, to me, is the biggest joke I've ever seen.
I figure when Schwartz came in, that was right after that 0-16 season.
Right.
And then Marinelli had, so they won 2 games in that first season with Schwartz. It was like winning a Super Bowl. You know, we were 0-16, we won 2 games in the following year. So,
You know, I had a chance to Scott and I have known Bill Keenis for a long time.
Right.
John, you know him too. And what happened was we went to a press conference together for a big golf tournament coming to the Detroit area. And I sat at a table, and the media just had some lunch before they were going to play a round of golf. And who was there but Jim Schwartz, and of course, Bill Keenis was with them. And they sat at my table for lunch. And I'll tell you what, I got a chance to meet Schwartz and know something about him. And the man is a class act. He was a good guy. Spent a lot of time talking to me and Bill about his family, and asked me about my family. And I was quite impressed. That was a real nice opportunity for me as a reporter, just to have lunch at a non-football setting, of course. We were at a press conference for a golf tournament because Bill and Coach were going to play, in the golf tournament with the media afterwards. But just a small story there from my background, chit-chatting with Schwartz, a good man, tough situation, as you guys said, in Detroit, though. One of many, many coaches that couldn't make it here in this town.
Yeah, but if there's anybody that deserves another chance at the head coaching job, and I thought he was going to get it a couple of years when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, Jim Schwartz does deserve another head coaching chance. Whether he gets it or not, it's another story. But tell you what, I thought Jim Schwartz did a pretty decent job under very difficult circumstances. So,
yeah.
You talk about people at a table, and it just maybe sparked my memory that when I got voted into the Detroit Sports Broadcasters, I think at my table when Dennis Davidson brought me that night, and it escapes me where that meeting was at, but Jim Brandstatter right there at my table, and I got to talk to him for a long period of time after listening to him all those years. And the night I got voted in, so that was a little sparking a memory after your story. So
yeah, I'll tell you what, Jim was one of our best presidents ever. What a great guy. I had the fortunate, as being executive director, to work with Jim, alongside Jim for several terms as president. And Scott, of course, you've been privileged to meet and talk to Jim and his wife, Robbie. Remember at the Lion games?
Oh, yeah.
Both home and away. And you got a chance to really know both Jim and Robbie too, Scott.
Oh, geez. Jim Brandstatter is one of my favorite people. Robbie Timmons is right there. And I was thankful I did get a photo of them over at the Outback Bowl in Tampa. But and of course, when I used to write for DSBA all the time, Jim Brandstatter allowed a lot of stuff to go through that most presidents wouldn't even touch these days. I'm not going to get into that in the broadcast. but Jim Brandstatter to me is A1 class all the way. And God love Robbie Timmons. She's an absolute sweetheart too. And of course, but that's the thing I miss about being in Detroit, are the relationships that I've built. I don't have that here in Florida. I can only go by I look forward to it when they come to my neck of the woods and we talk and catch them there. But it's not the same. When we were over at Indianapolis, you couldn't have a much better table than Ernie Harwell, myself, George, and Mike Murray, who one of the classiest people you can ever meet too. I look at Mike Murray and some of my favorite PR guys I worked with over the years in and out of Detroit are Chip Namias, who's number one. I met him in 1982 when he was with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. He And then he ended up going to the Miami Dolphins. I've known him for the better since 1982. Dan Edwards in Jacksonville is a class act. I work with him from time to time. Harvey Green of the Dolphins, and Bill Keenis is certainly there. Mike Murray. So, and I can get into more and more names, but these guys here, to me, are just some of the most phenomenal people I've ever dealt with.
And then remember, Scott, you were good friends too with the Green Bay Packers.
Lee Remmel, thank you so much for bringing that.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll never forget the time when I covered my first Super Bowl when I got lectured by Mike Murray and Lee Remmel about 15 minutes apart because I was shell-shocked about what was going on, and they read me like a clear piece of plastic. I was joking around with Dan Edwards yesterday when we were at the game, the Lions game. I said, and I told Chip Namus was the older brother I never had, I mean, I could think of you, George, as one of those too.
Yeah.
And when I was out in L.A. with the Southern California sports broadcasters, and Chip saw me I told him I was calling my wife at 4 a.m. to make sure she was on the road at 7:30. Chip laid into me. He said, "What are you out here cotton picking mine the way you're running all over the place? Don't do that stuff." And I told that to Edwards, and Edwards he had a nice smile from here all the way to, because I said, I told Dan I deserved it, so I'm not going to sit here. I said, Dan said, don't worry, I've gotten it a few times from Chip too. It doesn't matter. That's the type of guy hopefully you can meet one day down the road. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the Detroit Tigers, the managerial situation. Alavia, is this a make or break hire for him? I know a couple names being bannered out there include George Lombard, first base coach of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who's 45 years old. Marcus Thames, former Tiger, age 43, and he's currently the hitting coach of the New York Yankees. And we've heard the Alex Cora is being brought up, the A.J. Hinch as well. I don't think Mike Scioscia would be a good fit there, but all right, John, give us your perspective.
John, what do you think about this situation? They're going to bring in a veteran, or they're going to go with somebody more raw and not experienced as a manager? Scott and I were talking off air about this, and I just don't have a good feeling. I don't want them to make the same mistake as Osmus, and I don't know. They're talking to a lot of coaches. Not to say these guys are bad guys at all. What are your thoughts, John?
Well, I think they interviewed Don Kelly today, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
so Don Kelly, I think, had an interview today. I know Marcus Tim's name's been kicked around, and I think Gardenhire actually wanted Lloyd McClendon, I think. So I don't know will they ever give Lloyd that chance to be a head coach. I wouldn't think the guy from Houston will even be in the running since that scandal. I don't think A.J. Hinch, I know his name's been mentioned, but I don't think they probably want that here. So he just had that suspension, right, for the call signs.
Right.
So I don't think
he'll be available to manage in January. Obviously, still a little time. I actually like the possibility of A.J. Hinch. I do believe that guys deserve a second chance. I really do.
I think they're probably going to stay with probably one of these ex-players, and maybe Freddie Gonzalez, I think, that was mentioned too out of Baltimore.
Heard that name,
But you got Don Kelly, who played, 2008 to 15 in the organization. He's a bench coach, I think, with the Pirates now, and he was a scout, I think, for the Tigers for a little bit. So, Don Kelly, he played every position. I mean, the guy is probably knowledgeable. I don't know. I think you did Osmus before, who was young. And I think you got to look at the caliber of the players, maybe the mentality. You do have a lot of young guys. I mean, really you only have Miggy anymore. That is the old veteran. And you could probably bring a guy in that will mix with this. I think when Osmus came in, he just had the wrong players. I think if you'd have brought a Gardenhire in when they brought Osmus in, that Tiger club could have been different. But you had all those Eagles and all those veteran players. Now you really don't have that. Shoop and Crone is probably your biggest veterans, other than Farmer 3 years here, and Miggy. You don't have a lot of long-term players here. A lot of these guys, couple of years. So I would say probably a guy like a Don Kelly or Marcus Timms would probably fit right here, I think.
Yeah, and they've talked about Vance Wilson and this guy Pedro Greifel. I've heard his name mentioned before. I still would like to get a veteran, but you're right. Yep. This is like the era just before Sparky Anderson. They were young, but Sparky had a little bit better advantage because they had a year or two under their belt, some of the younger stars. And so it's a similar situation. I think Sparky came in 79, I believe. Was it 79 or 80? And they won it all in 84. So you're looking for a guy, hopefully, that could be there and continue to be there.
But back then, though, you had Ralph Haug. Okay, so you're talking about a veteran manager compared to a younger guy. And, of course, nowadays it's different these days. A lot of these veteran guys didn't have the amount of Latin players either to deal with as well. So when you compare back then, you got a lot of Latin players, players from Japan, Korea, and the beat goes on and on. It's different. Tell me, I wonder if Ralph Haug knew anything how to speak Spanish back then. I encourage both of you guys, if you could ever do it, to sit in on a Marlins availability. And I can tell you the only regret I have back in high school was I wish I would have learned another language in Spanish, because I never thought I'd have to go ahead and sit through a bilingual media availability call. Those have been interesting when they switch it to Spanish. And how do I know what great questions are being asked, but I don't understand what they're asking?
Well, I think probably the main thing, though, who are they going to sign? I think Avila obviously he's going to have to get that manager, but what's he going to do with some of these players? Is he going to go after Shoop again? Is he going to go after Crone? Because there's probably not going to be a lot of veterans that want to come to this team. You're coming to a team with no manager right now. And so probably signing a veteran player is going to be tough. You only have Miggy here, so you're probably rebuilding again. So they're looking at a guy who could probably, it's almost like with all the young kids, it's this now, the phone. You got a bunch of millennials on this team probably. These guys are 20, 21, 22. They're young kids in that farm system. So they may want to get somebody who can probably, fit in with those young kids, And you bring a guy, like Gardenhire, I thought was great with these kids. But I don't know. Probably going to be a chore.
You're right, John. And Gardenhire did a nice job while he was here. But it's just
I thought he did. In spring training, I tell you, when I looked at this club in spring training, I saw how healthy Miggy looked. He slimmed down. Fulmer was probably throwing 50 or 60 pitches in a day. Watching Crone hit the ball, watching Shoop hit the ball. Jacoby Jones, I was hoping we still have not seen a full season from Jacoby Jones. And what he started to do in this short season before he got hurt was just unbelievable. That team was firing, with Crone in there and Shoop and him. And then Candelario actually did well. Even in spring training, I said, these guys are probably going to win a few more games than last year, even though, they didn't have a lot of name guys on the team, but they had those key veterans that they shored up at first and second base. And Jacoby Jones, like I said, he was, I think, the key being healthy. And as soon as he went down and then Crone went down, this team just kind of collapsed into pitching. Boyd, when you look at that whole pitching staff, I think Scuba was like 1-4, Turnbull was like 4-4, Boyd was like only 3 wins with like 6 or 7 losses, and even Fulmer and Mize was they didn't have any wins, and that was. But I think once again with that shortened season, those guys were probably pitching in form where they would have been in April anyway, back in June. I mean, they were going 3 innings and getting hammered. They didn't have the work, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, years ago, I got an opportunity to interview Vance Wilson, and I've interviewed a lot of catchers over my lifetime. I really have, especially in this industry. And I got to admit, I was a catcher back in Little League and loved the position because your head was always in the game. You're manipulating the umpires a little bit, and you're in control of the game. So I think catchers tend to make a good managers. I think Vance Wilson, I don't know whether he's heavily going to be considered for it. But, but then you talk about marginal players that go on to become good managers. I don't know anything about Don Kelly, so I'm not going to comment on that. What's that?
I said, Sparky wasn't a great ball player.
Well, that's it.
Jim Leno wasn't a great ball player, but they're great managers,
Well, they're great baseball minds is really what they are.
Great baseball minds. And you're right about catchers, because looking a couple of years ago, there's probably 7 or 8 past catchers that were major league managers. So you're right. I mean, catchers are in that game. They run that game.
Right. So if they can run the game, they can certainly that's why I think they become really good, strong managers. I mean, I like Brad Ausmus. I think the only problem with Ausmus was that he did come in at the wrong time, that you needed a veteran manager then to take the team over the hump. I don't think he was the right manager at the right time. But I've got to know Brad Ausmus. In fact, when he was with the Angels, I spent time with him with the Angels as well, and he was one of the nicer people I've ever dealt with, and really liked Brad quite a bit. So I don't know. I think the thing with the Tigers managerial search is they can go so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to this one compared to as in other situations. But I tell you right now, I don't know if you know anything about Michael Hill at all of the Miami Marlins, but he just they're not renewing his contract after 19 years with the organization. So it makes me kind of wonder, and I believe he worked with Al Avila. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Al Avila goes ahead and talks to Michael Hill about joining the Tigers. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But there has been a history between the Marlins and the Tigers taking personnel over. Dave Dombrowski, once the general manager of the Marlins, won a world championship there.
Right.
Jim,
right.
the former manager. Michael Hill's been with that. I think that Derek Jeter moved on from him because he wants to bring in his own people. But you never know whether Michael Hill may talk to Al Avila. You can never have enough good baseball mind, but we won't make a prediction on that.
No, I don't know if he would figure in that. Avila seems to have a staff pretty well situated here in Detroit, but I mean, you never know. Never say never. I mean, he could possibly be for some more talent, but it's interesting that even the guy like Dave Dombrowski never landed another job. Now he's involved with trying to put a franchise together, I believe, for the city of Nashville.
But you can't compare Dave Dombrowski's situation, and I'll tell you why you can't. Number one, with Miami, he built that team, and he had a big payroll, and then they disassembled it when they won it all. But you end up trading away good players, your farm system away to get guys, and then the organizations are set back. Same held true in Detroit. Had some instant gratification getting him a couple World Series, couldn't close the deal, but he did. Boston, the same thing. And of course, I think what happened with Montreal was unfortunate because of the 1994 players' strike. So, you begin to wonder whether there's a price you pay for a depleted farm system in terms of how far it sets you back. And I think if he's going to do anything, you should probably spearhead the efforts in National League. So.
And that would be a thing, you have a feeder system for players. You would think you'd have a feeder system for your managers. You have, guys like Rebelio down there. He's one of the minor league coaches, and he was a catcher. Pena, Prince is going to take over, I think. And you think these managers work with these kids all the way through these steps. They would be probably a maybe not a logical choice, but something they even consider too, that they've been with some of these players probably for 2 to 4 years, correct? When you see them down in Lakeland with these kids, and then these kids got a chance to play in A ball and Double A, Triple A, and so they've been used to these managers, and they see them. It's almost like, I think when the Red Wings made that choice, bringing the guy from Grand Rapids in to coach, because a lot of those players played for him. But we could see how that works out too. But you get used to these players, and you think you'd have a good feeder system for a manager. And maybe that's why they thought Lloyd McClendon. But once again, I don't know. I don't know McClendon's situation. He's baseball knowledgeable, but you almost got to probably bring a guy in that can get used to these kids. They're kids, really. So
I could see McClendon staying on the coaching staff somehow.
I could too. Yeah, he's valuable. He knows these kids.
Oh yeah. I just struggle with him being the full-time manager. All right, so let's talk about the World Series a little bit. This will really blow you away. David Price, obviously, the Tigers acquired one of those big deals from Tampa. But here's the wild card. You ready for this? Prospect Willie Adames is with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a shortstop. How do you like that? You talk about a twist of irony. A young prospect in Class A is now playing the World Series. And David Price, by the way, with the Dodgers, opted out. And yeah, how about that? You want an unbelievable connection there. I don't know if he'll even get a World Series ring at all if he opted out, unless the Dodgers are extremely generous to do it.
Yeah, but look at what he did when he opted out. He gave $1,000 to every minor league player in the Dodgers organization with his salary.
Oh, generosity's there.
Yeah, generosity. You got to give the guy a ring if you win. Yeah, look what he did for your organization. Yeah.
All right, well, that's a good point. All right.
Hey, David Price.
Yeah, well, more power to him. Noble and fine. But let's talk about Willie Adames. How about that?
Well,
Prospect a shortstop for the Tampa Bay Rays.
you have to give up something to get somebody. So obviously, the Tigers, when they made that trade back in, I believe, 2014 or whenever it was, I'm looking at his statistics in the minor leagues. He had, he had some decent numbers. He had some decent numbers for the Tigers and the farm system in 2013 and 2014. But again, you're talking about what we talked about earlier, Dave Dombrowski, the wheeler dealer. He was there to win it now. And obviously the prospects they gave up, you never know when they can come back and haunt you. And obviously with Adames, it's coming back to haunt the Tigers. So look at the guy from the Milwaukee Brewers that they gave up on. I forget his name.
Yeah.
The Tigers lost. Yeah. And he used to be in their farm system. But these things happen, Scott and John. I'm happy for the kid, and I'm happy for Tampa Bay. They're an unbelievable story, and knocking off the mighty teams in the American League and getting to the World Series. It's a great story, and I'd love to see them win. They've never won it. They've been there once before in 2008.
Right.
But again, they're going to have their hands full, obviously, with that Dodgers team because that's an experienced Dodgers team. So I'm still going to go with the Dodgers to win it in 6 games.
Yeah, I think the two people you're referring to are either Hernan Perez or Corey Knebel.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Thank you, Scott.
That's all right. Get on these things where I can't let anything get past us on the broadcast.
Whatever happened to Drew Smiley in that trade, though?
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, and I think George makes an excellent point, too, because you don't really know how players get developed. Different organizations. And I always go back to the John Smoltz thing with Doyle Alexander. People say, Doyle Alexander came in and did his job, correct?
Yeah.
Right? And John Smoltz, who would have known if the Tigers back then, look at their pitching coach staff back in the minors back then. The pitching staff for the Tigers in the 80s and the 90s wasn't that stellar. So John Smoltz may not have been the pitcher if he stayed in the Tigers organization, correct?
Good point.
That the pitching coach at Atlanta had, I think, was the ex-Mets, and his name escapes me, but he pitched for the Mets. He was the minor leaguer. Glavine, Smoltz, all those guys. Maddox said he developed. If he would have, Smoltz would have stayed in our minor league system. I mean, look at some of the guys that they fast-tracked these guys up so much. He maybe had 2, 3 years, 4 years, been a mediocre pitcher, and not been John Smoltz of John Smoltz. So, like Tampa Bay, that kid could have not developed in our system. He could have went to the Yankees and not developed. He could have went to the A's and not developed. But they had the right players in Tampa to develop them. So,
well, I'll tell you one thing.
We got David Price out of the deal. So,
let's not kid ourselves. The Tampa Bay Rays have to rely on player development. They do. Yeah. They're a small market with one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. So that's the only way that they can exist is by making sure you draft well, you develop well. I think lots of times people wonder with the University of Michigan, you can recruit well, but if you don't develop well, it doesn't matter how good these guys that are bringing in.
Yep, and look at when was it Nebraska here when you had Garcia, Castellanos, and what was the second baseman that went to Toronto finally? How was it, Brandon something? Well, he went partway on those guys,
right?
And when the Tigers were making that playoff run, I think somebody wanted Castellanos. He went part with them, and then 2 years later they're all gone. The Garcia gets shipped off. This other guy gets caught in the Toronto deal, and then Castellanos is gone. So. It's baseball, I think George hit on the head. They're wheeling and dealing to do the moment right now. They're not worried about 3 years down the line because there's going to be a draft. There's going to be other players we're going to sign. We're going to make deals, out of the Verlander deal and all these other deals. How many of those players are panning out right now? From Verlander, those guys.
And again, we can't rehash history, guys, but all those great pitchers they had, like you said, Drew Smiley, Verlander, Price, Porcello,
Scherzer, Fister.
It was just so sad the way they dismantled that pitching staff and just let all those guys go. And a lot of those, they didn't get much back in return, including David Price. He was only here for a year. But I'm just saying that, the Tigers tried to buy that. We know they tried to buy the pennant in the World Series. They did win 2 pennants. but they stunk in
Make the big game.
in the 2 World Series, winning 1 game. Jim Leland is 1-8 in his Tiger World Series record. 1-8. That's not Hall of Fame material to me, fellas. I'm sorry, but I like Jim Leland.
Reminds me of Jim Kelly and Dan Marino. Can never get the big game under your belt, So you can go to all those Super Bowls and not win it. So, we had that roster, we had those players, and we just couldn't haul it in 06 or 12, So
Yeah, but what is Hall of Fame material for Jim Leland is at least he has a World Championship ring under his belt. And I think when you look at his entire body of work with the Tigers, it's really pretty strong getting him to the postseason often enough compared to what they've had before. So if I were going to make a case for a Hall of Fame, I would certainly give Jim Leland my vote that he belongs in Cooperstown because of his entire body of work. But that's not a decision I'm going to be included in. So I guess we'll save that.
None of us will be.
So what would you guys think, like during the season, when you knew the season was going downhill, would you think you would have brought some of those other kids up, like Green and some of those guys?
No.
Just to get them.
Green and Torkelson and that young catcher from Ohio State. No, I wouldn't have brought them up.
Yeah,
I think they did it the right way, John and Scott. They brought up Schoolball and yeah.
Mize got some game in.
Yeah, and Mize got his experience, and the outfielder, what's his name, Dixon?
Right.
Yeah. He came up instead of Green. No, I don't think they were ready to bring all those guys up. I think they did a good job with what they had. And like you said, the starting pitching just let them down. Matt Boyd had a terrible year. Turnbull had a nice year. He's a good kid. I like Spencer Turnbull a lot.
Norris didn't do bad in relief. I thought Norris did decent in relief.
Yes, he did. Norris had a good year. Buck Farmer had a good year. There were some bright spots on that team. Obviously, Candelario, was a bright spot after he got off to a terrible start. But I think that the Tigers are approaching it the right way. I mean, they're doing the right thing, bringing the kids along. And like you said, they got rid of all the big contracts now except for Cabrera. And there was nothing they can do about that. Nobody's going to take that contract off their hands. Miguel's going to be here for probably the rest of his career, and he's not going to be able to play first base, even though he would like to. We know that. Yeah. But like you said, John, they have some talent there. They've got some young prospects coming up, and I think it bodes well for their future.
Yeah, John, I think you're right. Okay. There was nothing wrong with bringing Casey Mize up and Tarek Screwball, and those guys but they had played minor league ball. They were able to move through the minor league system. To bring in the 3 guys that were just drafted or was it great? No. They need more seasoning in the minor leagues a little, because the difference between college ball and the pro game is substantial. Taking away the aluminum bat factor. Now, I know Green is still young, but you're okay there. You don't want to bring a prospect up if he's not ready. Don Mattingly has taught me so much this year about baseball that I never thought. That it's one thing to get here, it's another to stay here too.
Yeah.
So he says, don't get complacent you're here because you get in here one day and then you're out tomorrow.
Have you got a chance to see Cam Gibson at all?
Who?
No, I had a chance. I don't know.
Yeah, Kurt's son, Cam. So I saw him in spring training 2 years in a row, and he's a monster. He's probably faster than his dad. Plays the game the same way. So now who knows if he'll make it up? I think Kurt says he needs discipline. So when I got to talk to Gibson, I think probably at the end of last year in the press box, and he said he just lacks some discipline. But he's ferocious, man. He's big, and I'd say he's probably faster than Kurt was. So
I think the one thing that Don Mattingly's taught me a lot, and he's taught a lot of us here in the South Florida media, the same thing, is you want sustainable success is what you want. Yes, a lot of playoff droughts were broken this year because of the shortened season, and I definitely don't believe an asterisk should ever be placed on this season, because what these guys have gone through is like boot camp, let alone what you've had to do in the postseason. But I want to make sure that I emphasize heavily here, sustainable success. And I think that's what the Detroit Tigers are trying to build there. Miami Marlins lost 105 games in 2019, and they kept it competitive all year because they brought in a nice mixture of veteran players to complement the younger players. And I think that you're going to start finding out, and the Tampa Bay Rays are built that way, and a lot of good teams are built. Make sure you have a good core of young players, bring in timely veterans, and then you're able to have a good balance. But sustainable success is what people have to understand. And so let's go back to the Lions, okay? Ahead, obviously, we know they have Atlanta. I know, John, you seem to think that Atlanta will probably beat them. Of course, they have a new coach, Raheem Morris. And in the last 2 weeks, new coaches won their debut, meaning that the Houston Texans had Romeo Crennel beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? But did, nonetheless. Nowadays, everybody's beating Jacksonville. And now Raheem Morris handed it to the Minnesota Vikings, who dismantled their team anyhow. You let Stephon Diggs get away. And, you know, Kirk Cousins is underperforming. And, of course, Kevin Stefanski's with the Cleveland Browns. You get the drill. The Vikings headed downhill, at least as it stands. So, but I think it's a game the Lions could win in Atlanta. They're going to certainly have to play a little bit better to beat Atlanta than they did Jacksonville, because, again, Jacksonville's a very young team. But let's look ahead even further. And look at the November portion of the schedule. They're at home against the Indianapolis Colts, very winnable football game. They're at the Vikings. Of course, remember, they're not playing outside. They're playing indoors. Okay, so you have field turf versus field turf and no elements, only an air conditioning bill. Who knows how long, and who knows if anybody could afford the air conditioning bill for the Viking Stadium. Then you got Washington at home, struggling as well. At Carolina, can they win? That's up in the air. And then, of course, the old Houston Texans. I just brought up Romeo Crennel. So of those 6 games, and I know, John, you mentioned this earlier, that if Patricia should have been fired, he should have been fired during the bye week. I agree with you wholeheartedly, especially after the way things looked. Now, it wasn't the 1-3 start, but it's probably the collapse against the Bears that hurt him probably worse than any of those. So let's look ahead to the Lions' schedule between Atlanta, the Colts, the Vikings, Washington, Carolina, and Houston. How many wins are you guys pulling out of that?
I'm pulling
5-6.
What's
how
that?
many?
I say they're going to go 5-6 out of that last 11.
They're gonna
5 out of 6 they're going to win?
I see them either finishing 7-9 or 6-10.
okay.
That season.
No record. I got it.
Yeah, I think out of that last 11 games, like I said, I think the Colts will beat them. I think you got Phillip Rivers. I mean, some of these big quarterbacks are going to throw, and that defense just – you get a throwing quarterback, those guys are getting beat, you know, and they're making dumb plays. I think the Texans, they lose to the Texans too. I think the Texans, I think they're going to lose to Atlanta. I think Calvin Ridley back there and Matt Ryan's going to get them. Green Bay, I think they're going to lose to Green Bay. I think actually they'll win against Chicago. I think that next game against Chicago, I think we'll beat them.
But of those 6 winnable games, and I emphasize this, between Atlanta, the Colts, the Vikings, Washington, Carolina, and the Texans. I know, but the thing about Phillip Rivers is he's really inconsistent. He really is. So that's, although the guy to watch out for is Jonathan Taylor. I want to know about Jonathan Taylor. Just ask the Michigan Wolverines how dangerous he was when Bucky the Badger battered the Wolverine, although it's a different animal up in the NFL. And then the Vikings, the Washington football team, Houston Texans, they're all a mess. Carolina,
Yeah.
you don't know what you're going to get there.
You just cannot predict. And
It's football any given day.
John, you bring up a good point, and Scott, you know this too. The Lions have a habit of making a quarterback have a great rating game against themselves. Yeah. They've done it with Trubinsky over the years. They've done it with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, just go down the list. The Lions typically – the opposing quarterback has great games against them many, many times, even at home, even home games. I think that out of those 6, Scott, I'll say the Lions will do 3-3. And then that'll put them in a position of what? 5 wins and 6 losses after 11 games. And I'm with you, John. Early in the year, I picked them to be at best 7-9. And I don't see anything that right now that changes my mind about that.
Yeah, I still think they're going to go 6-10 or 7-9. They're going to get some of those wins. I think we know they're going to play the Buccaneers. I think you still got Tom Brady and Goodwin and Mike Evans right there. And I just think this Lions secondary, I mean, we've proved it. Double-digit leads and we give it up. We've lost. We should never lost that lead to Chicago. We should, even the Saints. We were up on the Saints. I mean, and Drew Brees just came right back. So.
Well, you want to talk about me validating George Eichorn's point. What about when Matthew Stafford and Matt Flynn went at it out in Green Bay? Matt Flynn got paid for by the Seahawks. Of course, he didn't get the starting job when Russell Wilson entered the picture. But I think Matt Flynn should definitely be thanking the Lions for helping him make a lot of money. But Matthew Stafford played a game very well enough to win, but the Lions couldn't stop anybody, which circles back to the comment that Steve Ballesteri talked about with the bend and not break situation. The Lions are so vulnerable to that long pass. I actually thought Jacksonville might beat the Lions, believe it or not, because of if Gardner Minshew got on the same page with DJ Chark, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have some decent receivers.
Yeah, that guy tore it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
They tell you what,
he tore it up yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, you got Chris Conley, you got out there DJ Chark, but the Lions ran the ball effectively, and Stafford didn't have to have a great game, but he managed the game well enough. I mean, I don't care about the interception he threw. I think it was a tip ball or not. If you're going to have to nail a guy with an interception, you got to earn it. He didn't earn it.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, that wasn't his fault.
That was
no. But I think you got another fuse burning right now. I think in Galladay right now. He had I think 4 catches yesterday, 95 yards. He didn't get a touchdown, but he's I think he put a tweet out about will they give me a contract now? Like an extension or long-term contract. So where do you see that happening? Because we've seen it past what they do to these guys. So Galladay's up and he's already tweeting. If you keep this guy, I mean,
Well, Galladay had 4 catches for I think it was 105 yards. So he
was 105.
Okay. Yeah, it was over 100 yards.
Yeah.
He's a tall target. Again, the Lions' issues over the years is you have good players. You got to either pay them, and you can't run out of town like Matt Patricia did with a lot of guys when they want to leave, they leave. I mean, Darius Slay's really didn't have any kind words for Matt Patricia. Then again, a lot of these guys that are leaving don't. So, again, it's all about the culture. Nobody, how do you attract free agents? Well, you won't with a guy like him. But yeah, they need to pay Galladay for sure. He wants to stay there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think they'll sign him. I think they'll extend him. I really do. What concerns me is the NFL has become this year a season of haves or have-nots. You got like almost 10 teams or something with 1 or 0 wins on the year. And then the opposite of that is you've got teams with 4 or 5 wins already this year. And to me, I know that's not the kind of parity that the Commissioner Goodell and others want. A lot of really, really bad teams this year. Look at that NFC East. 1 win for Washington, 1 for the Giants, 1 for the
Giants.
And the Dallas is in first place with 2 wins.
Yep.
I mean, to me, we're seeing some bad football this year so far, I think.
Yeah, but my question to you.
Look how many guys opted out from playing.
Well, that's it too.
A lot of big names.
Yeah.
A lot of big names.
Yeah, thanks, John, for making the point I was thinking about. You're talking about missed practice time. Everything had to be done virtually during the offseason, no OTAs. And you're at a disadvantage for a coach that's coaching the team for the first year that doesn't know anything about it. I'm not making excuses, but COVID-19, there are lots of different variables here about why teams aren't as ahead of things as they should. And don't forget, you didn't have 4 preseason games either. You didn't have any preseason games. So
you get to see the players.
Right, and you have less good available to increase the taxi squads.
Excuses. They're supposed to win. They should know how to win, these teams. It's terrible the way they're playing.
Well,
How'd you like to be in New York City? You got the 0-6 Jets and the 1-5 Giants to root for. Whoa! How exciting in New York.
And you make a good point, too, because I don't think the players even want to play for a preseason season. I mean, when they do preseason, how many minutes does Brady play? How many minutes does Rodgers play? So those guys don't even want to play. Your preseason games just to find that 48th, 49th, 50th, and 52nd, third guy. You already know who your starters are just about. You might get that number 5 receiver or you're looking for that 4th running back, but most of those guys aren't going to play preseason to get hurt. But yeah, I think, the COVID is probably scary with these, how many games have we playing on Tuesday now?
Right.
The Monday night game's a Tuesday game, or we've canceled games, and instead of a bye week, they have to play because now they have a new bye week. And it is probably scary for those guys because you're out there, face to face with guys, and who knows, it's 2 days later, someone gets it and they test positive.
Good
And
point.
so,
Good point.
yeah. So,
Well, there's so many variables that are out of people's control. We got to take COVID-19 because it looks like, I remember Nick Saban made it, he was totally accurate. He said it's disruptive. It is for everybody. It's not going away. I mean, think about it, okay? Press boxes, even for us, only 60% capacity, 66% capacity. I had an opportunity to be up in the Jaguars press box. I saw everybody social distance, and a lot of the things that you normally see aren't there, like the halftime meal. You don't have that no more. You just take a couple snacks. Now, it doesn't matter. We get treated well with the media just being going there, but the social distancing, it's just a totally different animal, and you always worry that with football, there's so much contact, whether these guys are going to get the virus through contact, not like flag football. So there's a lot of things. So who can explain why they're bad or not? I don't know. Have-nots, I don't know.
and there's a lot of people in football on the sidelines too, versus baseball. We got 25 guys in the dugout, maybe a trainer, bat boy. In football with the 53 players, and everyone got the signs, the line judges, people moving the first down markers, trainers, people running Gatorades. You probably added 75 to 80 people on the sidelines too.
Well, further, and to back up your point even more is, they're not allowing as many photographers on the field either.
Right.
My other half is a photographer, and she's not able to cover games this year because they're trying to keep the sideline as less crowded as you can. So they just limit it to just a few.
Even the cardboard fans don't want to go. So yeah, it, like we were talking earlier, Scott. Even with the Tigers this year, you see when you would see a game, you'd see a photographer, in the stands, and you'd see somebody else in the stands, and I don't even know if people are even in the press box watching the game at Comerica because it didn't seem like there was a lot of media there, and it's got to be bad for the broadcasters because they're doing it from a studio. They don't even get to travel with the team, so
Right.
I believe they're watching a game on 3 or 4 TVs and trying to call the best game they can, which is it's just weird. Sports just wasn't that fun, but I still enjoyed watching it. I was still flicking the channel every night watching baseball and things like that. And I'm still watching my share of football, but it's just strange. It's strange.
Very different.
Not being down there is strange.
Well, the broadcasters are doing it from the ballparks.
On home games, right?
There. They're doing it there, but then Doc Emmerich, who we'll talk to maybe before we end the broadcast, and NBC made him a studio at home, and he called the games from home. So,
because I think on the Tigers, Dickerson and Price was in the studio on away games. They may have been home in the broadcast for the home games, but they didn't travel with the team, I don't believe.
Well, same held true here in Miami. I mean, we had Paul Severino, who does our play-by-play, and Todd Hollinsworth. They never went on the road, these guys. And the pregame shows were all done over at Marlins Park. We had to deal with that there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the writers that my colleagues now, I can remember going on these Zoom calls, everybody's in their place, and here I am at my man cave. But still, I mean.
It's going to be scary, too, even when this is over. I mean, who's, are you going to have 35,000 people again at Comerica Park? Are people going to want to do that? Are people going to think twice when they're crammed next to somebody at a game thinking what could happen again, So I don't know. Maybe
the way sports are covered, I got news for you. I'll be hard pressed to think who knows how many media people are going to get approved nowadays, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, you probably won't have no more face-to-face interviews. I mean, the locker rooms are probably going to be closed for a long time.
Well, that's what happened yesterday up in Jacksonville, John. You know what? This is my first look at it yesterday where, they're doing everything virtual. We're up in the press box. I wasn't linked into what they were doing yesterday, of course, but I was able to get a feel for what the virtual thing was all about. No, there was a lot. And for us as writers, reporters, media, to not have that contact with athletes anymore, the game has changed forever. And I think there are a lot of these things that while they're in 2020, they're going to be, they may be the new norm. That's what I'm thinking. So,
yeah. I mean, last year we were sitting at the table together doing this, last year we'd be at the table together talking sports, but
having our Red Wings or Lions, Rome. That's right.
Yeah.
All those wonderful buffets deals. I miss them so much.
Yeah. I miss Ron Cameron. I miss talking to Ron in the stories. So, you know, but
I'm sure
I think you're right, Scott. This is the norm for a while, I think. So probably a couple of years at least that people forget about it, and then they're going to want to go back in and sit next to somebody. But when's that going to be? You know, and it is good to see fans in the stands at some of these games. And there's nothing wrong with that too. You have occupancy, I guess, but you're probably not going to have concessions. You're probably going to have to say, hey, here comes the football game. You can bring a cooler in with your own food because we don't want concessions. We don't want food going over, and we got to clean that up. You open the bathrooms, but it might be a fun way to do it. No more concessions and just space out people. So.
Well, I wouldn't worry about concessions for one reason. If anybody wants their team's paraphernalia, they're going to get on Amazon anyways. It doesn't.
Yeah, but I'm talking about food-wise. Just let the people bring their own food in.
Food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure you're going to see fans anytime soon anyways. My gut feeling with hockey is you might see a mini bubble and keep everybody within limited to 4 to 6 arenas. That's just a feeling I have. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Well, there's only a handful of football teams that's allowing fans in, but they were. I think Cleveland had some.
We had them in Jacksonville yesterday too, 15,000, and there was some Honolulu Blue silver in there. Where then, what do you expect? They play in Jacksonville once every 8 years. The Lions don't play in Tampa like they used to do years ago when I was covering regular for the Detroit Monitor, where we had our trip back to the divisional. So I got to see him. I made a lot of great relationships there.
Yeah.
So
times have changed.
So all right, let's go into the Detroit Red Wings a little bit, John. How do you look at Steve Yzerman's vision of how he's building this hockey team?
It's Stevie. I mean, look at some of the deals they just made. Some of these veterans that just came in. I like the Lucas Raymond pick, even though he didn't do too well, but he's young, and Wings have a way of developing some players. But, you just got Stahl, and they picked up Grace, the goalie, that John Murrow, Bobby Ryan. They picked up a lot of veterans, which is I think key, and Yzerman knew that. So you got all these young kids, and you're probably going to lose a couple veterans. It don't seem like Stevie's scared to tell guys to hit the road. I mean, he's already cut a couple veterans. You're probably going to see a lot more go. But some of these guys they signed, I think, a lot of defensemen, and that goalie I think is going to really help out too, because they just got rid of the goalie, so they just let Howard go. So I like Stevie's vision. I think for probably the last 5-6 years down at Hockey Town, I think that's what people were saying even in the media, that hey, when's Stevie going to come back? When's he going to come back? So I think
and you're right, John. There's a lot of Luke Witkowski, let him go. He let Jimmy Howard go. Abdicator go. Trevor Daley go. John Erickson. So I think that's good. That's good because he needs to unfortunately weed out some of the guys that have been around a long time and haven't really been producing very much, or they've been injured. And so it's time for them to bring in some of these younger guys. And like you said, Bobby Ryan will help out, and Grease, whatever his name is, he'll help out. There's a lot to be said for these guys, right? Stahl and Troy Stecker is another one they brought in on defense, John Merrill. So I think he's doing the right thing. He can't just go with all kids. It's not possible. It's not going to work that way. And he knows he's got to try to be in contention for the playoffs. The fans are frustrated already. They missed the playoffs several years in a row after that wonderful consecutive streak they had. What was it, 25, 26 years, Scott? 25 years in a row. And so, I agree with you, John and Scott. I think that Stevie Y is a good man for the job. He had his his fingerprints all over that Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup.
Right.
And now it's time for him to put those fingerprints in the making on the Red Wings contending it again.
Yeah, you hate to see Jimmy Howard leave with a 2-23 record, but he played badly last year. Then he gets rid of Andre Athanasio to Edmonton, and then what do you think happens? Ken Holland got rid of him anyway. So apparently Steve was wise to move on from him. Holland thought he could rekindle him, and what did Yzerman get, a draft choice or so for a guy who probably could have easily been let go for sure. So.
Yeah.
And those veterans that you signed came from good contending teams, with the Rangers, Vancouver, Ottawa, Vegas. So those guys came from some decent teams. And I think George is right. They're going to help these young kids along, split those defenders up. I think out of there's 4 defenders that he signed that were veterans. So, and the goalie, I think the goalie won the Jennings Trophy like in 19 or 18. So, he's young. So
yeah.
Well,
I like what they're doing. I liked. In fact, I was just telling my buddy last night. I said, I really didn't pay attention. I watched the draft. A lot of young kids. You don't know how they're going to develop. The kid only had like 10 points in 30 games. That Raymond kid, but he's 18, 19. So he's going to do well. But you never know how they're going to develop. But you have these veterans. I said, man, I didn't realize some of these veterans that we actually picked up. I heard the names come in, but I wasn't really registering it because they were out of the playoffs. So, but then when I actually sat down the other day and looked at the names, I go, wow, I like Stahl, I like Merrill, I like Ryan. So I think they're good pickups, good ads.
Well,
they're going to help this team.
Gets back to what I've been saying all along during the whole broadcast. Sustainable success, right?
Yeah.
I talked about Don Manley, and I'll keep saying it because that's the closest example that I can to relate to how things are done. You need veterans to complement the young players. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that's the one thing that Don has taught me. And like I told you, he's taught me a lot. Not that I never knew it from other organizations I work with, but anytime you're involved with something on a very close to it, the repetition drives it in your head, and you get it. Do you know what I mean? And that's exactly how it works out. So,
yeah, I think you hit it. And Stevie is a success. I mean, like George said, he had his hands all over Tampa Bay. So you see what he did in Tampa Bay, and I see that here in a couple of years. And they could continue shortly. So I don't see him win a Stanley Cup next year or the year after, but they're going to probably get in the playoffs.
You talked. Okay, now you brought this up earlier in the broadcast, John. Okay, now they brought up Jeff Blashill. It would have been very easy to let him go after this year. Gerard Gallant's out there, and probably a few other. But I think Steve Yzerman probably figured that he had John Cooper in Tampa, who obviously took the same route to the National Hockey League as Blashill. They seem to work well together. Do you think it was a right move for him to retain Jeff Blashill?
Yeah, I think you give the guy another year, at least. I like Blashill.
Okay.
I like him.
No, I disagree. I think they should have Stevie should have brought his own man in. Come on now, 17 wins, 49 losses, 5 ties, 39 points. 39 points. You know what the next team was in that conference? The Ottawa Senators with 62 points. So
look at some of those players he had, though.
I don't care. Blashill's had year after year after year, and as far as I'm concerned, his time was up. And I'm sorry, I'm disappointed in Stevie Y for not getting a new coach.
Well, I think next year is certainly a make or break year for Blashill. That's for sure. I mean, either he's got to at least keep them contending for the playoffs, get them closer to or get in. Otherwise you have to bring in a more experienced coach is what you have to do. It goes back to the what we talked about earlier about Brad Ausmus taking over the wrong time, versus a veteran manager.
Yeah, well, I like the reason I thought with Blashill because when they bought Blisman and the assistant, I thought that was going to be the next coach. I thought when they brought him in, Blashill would be gone. But then when they didn't make the move this year, it's like I figure Stevie's going to keep him. So and I thought for sure when they brought him in, the writing was on the wall. But it didn't happen.
No.
Well, that's true. You have a Stanley Cup winning coach on your bench.
And
I think if you were going to ever make a move, whether it's interim or regular, that certainly would have been a viable option for sure.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that move didn't get made. That kind of shocks me. But
once again, it goes back to, if they're going to keep that combination this year, and if things don't happen, does he get fired midstream? And then he does step up to be the coach. But I thought for sure when they brought him in last year, this was his last year, but then it didn't happen. So maybe Steve just says, I got to get the players first. Who knows? Maybe that's his thinking too. I got to get the players. I'm sure he has hands in that teaching. I'm sure Stevie is probably hands-on, so I'm sure he has a lot to say, like probably Ken Holland was. But, I thought for sure when they brought him in, Blashill would be gone, but maybe
Yeah.
Stevie, because I got to get the players first, and then maybe I'll work on a coach. So
Oh, wait, who are you referring to again?
which one?
The
Blashill,
yeah, I know about Jeff Blashill, but
the assistant coach.
yeah,
Yeah,
Bla-
Dan
Blas-
Blasma.
Bla- You're right. I mean, if the
Yeah,
team gets
okay.
off to a sorry start,
Yeah.
I may have a short leash on Blashill.
Yeah.
That's a good point, John, that they have that option. If things get off rocky start, you don't wish that on them, obviously, but if they do, the fans would not be happy about that. And of course, we don't even know if there's going to be any fans. So,
well, yeah,
but
that's an interim situation, either waiting to happen, audition for it, and find out where he goes. And yet, I wouldn't be surprised, since you have a Stanley Cup winning coach on there, that he would get the permanent job and utilize his own philosophy.
Or he's waiting for another coach that just is in another contract and he can't get out of it yet. So
That's
maybe
true.
there's a coach he wants that is his last year of his contract somewhere else, and that's what he's waiting for too. So
Yeah,
that could
yeah.
happen too. And
Yes.
we just talked about like Patricia. If you're going to fire Patricia on the bye week would have been the time, because you're going to have to bring somebody in that's familiar with the plays. So you just can't fire him now without, what are you going to have, 5 days of practice? So now I think you're probably stuck with Patricia for the whole year, probably, unless the offensive coordinator can come in and handle the team. But you would think if they were going to fire Patricia, it would have been done on the bye week to give, Bevel about a week and a half to work with these guys, So
Yeah, but let's take this back to when Darryl Rogers got fired, okay? And Wayne Fonts walked in there and got hired. And how did that work out?
how did it work out? I was young.
Yeah, not young, pal. And Wayne Fonts is the trivia question to a lot of questions here. The last guy to win a playoff. I think the only mistake that Wayne Fonts ever made was when he didn't allow Eric Kramer to retain the starting job and chose to go back to Rodney Peete. If that's positive reinforcement, then I must really be stupid, because Eric Kramer was on the wrong end of that.
And thus goes my point of Detroit organizations developing players. Look at the past, how many Heisman candidates or Heisman Trophy winners we've had as quarterbacks: Rodney Peete, Andre Ware, Chuck Long, and what happened to them? Joey Harrington, and how did they pan out? Right? You couldn't develop them. Who's our quarterback coaches back then?
Yeah, but that's part of your problem there. If you really want to pick that one up, John, is you can't sit there and fire the head coach, get rid of the offensive coordinator every year. You have to have continuity when you're developing quarterbacks with coordinators, quarterback coaches, and head coaches. And the Lions, have never had heads. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even Matthew Stafford's made the best of his situation, only because he's a stud.
It used to be like the old Arizona Cardinals. Remember when Edgar James left and Emmitt Smith went? It was like Arizona was the place where the running backs go to die.
Right.
Their last career at that team. But if you can't develop the players, it don't matter what good players you have. You got to develop them. And it's flip side like the coach. He can only call the plays. The players have to execute the plays. But
Absolutely. All right.
Well, let's talk about one other human interest note here that I really want to get to, John, and it gives me great pleasure to let everybody know about something that occurred a while back, and you maintain a relationship with this person. I'm referring to Cecelia Cichan. I guess her married name is Crocker. Survived a plane crash on August 16th, 1987, killed 156 people, but you were the man of the hour and saved this young lady's life. Why don't you go tell us about that experience, John, and the type of relationship you have? Because I'll tell you what, to me, that's an incredible story. I mean, I love talking sports with you, but when I'm talking to the guy that saved this young lady's life, and that you tell me you have a great relationship, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I said earlier, blessed to, I was a firefighter and still am, at 33 years. But yeah, I was a rookie firefighter in the city of Romulus, and big team effort back then. Actually, another guy actually hurt her when we got dispatched for this plane wreck on Flight 255 that hit Middle Belt Road. We were just young firefighters, we were rookie firefighters, and he actually heard her moaning. And he went south. I went north into the wreckage and checked a few people, and I found a chair. It was upside down, and ended up moving the chair, checking the occupant underneath her. And then I keep hearing a voice myself. And then when I turned to my right, I saw an arm coming out of this chair. And sure enough, that was the only survivor of that plane wreck. But yeah, it was a big team effort. For a guy who's only 20 years old, it was kind of a weird feeling, because all those guys that night went home with 156 deaths, and I went home at least with that one, that we found a survivor. And never forget it. And she reached out to me in 2005, I believe, through the 255 group, that they have a support group. And we started talking. She was probably 20s by then, and reached out to me by an email, and we talked, and told her everything she wanted to know. So she'd ask me questions, the rumors that she heard. And then in 2006, she got married, and I was invited to her wedding down in Alabama. So that was the first time I actually seen her, other than a couple of days after the crash. We saw her at U of M Hospital, and then we'd get a Christmas card maybe every year from the godparent or the grandparents of her, like on Santa's lap while she was growing. And then it kind of just died out. Probably we never got nothing else. So probably 5-6 years after the crash, we had no contact with them. And then, like I said, she contacted me, and through I guess articles and stuff when she got old enough. And so we talked and went to her wedding. And then now it's, she's married, got a great husband, got a child. They've done a few documentaries with her. Big Alabama fan, big Philadelphia Eagle and Philly fan, because she lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But, we'll talk like Michigan versus Alabama, and I'll talk with her husband, and just Alabama always beats us. So it's more like a brother-sister. It was funny because one time when I was in the press box, we went at the game, and she was at a Tiger game at Comerica Park. So, she was in the suite, so we were in there talking, and we'd have lunch now and then when she came into town. But, we talk a lot, text each other, and all the time. So like a little brother-sister relationship, I guess.
That's really neat. You say that she was raised by her aunt and uncle, I believe.
Yes, which was her godparents. Yep.
Right.
The Frank and Rita Lumpkin was her name. It was her mom's sister. So.
Wow. And did you ever have a whole lot of contact with her godparents as well, or not?
I did. Like I said, we met them at the hospital 3 days after we went and seen her. Because, it was weird, because after that whole wreck, they didn't know if she was on the plane or not, because she was actually, they had her on a, back then in the 80s, remember the old car seats? They were like little plastic things. Well, they had this little booster chair that she was in, and they thought that was in the car that one of the occupants on the ground died. But I kept telling our fire chief, I go, no, she was in a plane seat, and, we cut her dress off her. And the way they identified her was, they didn't know who she was for 3 or 4 days. And her grandmother painted her fingernails purple at the airport when they were flying out. And that's how they identified her, actually, because she had purple nail polish on. And they had a picture of her like leaving the airport, and she had a white dress on with a purple bow. And I cut that off, and I even told the chief, I said, hey, she had like a white dress on, but it was covered in soot and everything and dirty. But we cut the dress off her before we transported her to the hospital, but they identified her because she had purple nail polish. That's how, like 4 days later, they said this girl has purple nail polish, and her grandmother said, hey, our granddaughter had purple nail polish. So.
I got to tell you a funny story, how you talk about identifying. I actually lost an Acer computer at Orlando Airport. And I'll never forget that I was able to recover it, lost and found. And one of the things when they opened up this machine was I had Craigslist on there, because I was looking for something, and I was able to identify the computer and all that. And then let me tell you, when I came back from Branson, Missouri, I went up there and grabbed that thing, because I had a lot of important things on there. It was just one of those security checks that, unfortunately we didn't have the computer with us, and I found it eventually. But it's amazing how you can identify certain things.
Yeah.
Purple nail polish. And the only reason I bring it up, John, to me, when I heard about it and all that, to me, in her eyes, I know, and her family, that you're a hero to her, and that it's amazing how, her brother and her parents were both killed on that, and she was the sole survivor. and yet it's good that you have a brother-sister relationship with her to this day. And I'm always inspired. I'm glad we have a chance to address it one time here on the Sports Exchange for sure.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's just like I said, I was trained by some great guys, and in my job as a captain now, I try to instill that in my young millennials I have, because my whole crew wasn't even alive when that happened. So, my whole crew, I run my own shift, and all those guys are like 23, 25, 30. I know your son-in-law is a firefighter too, I believe. What, Sterling Heights, George?
Madison Heights.
Madison, yeah. And it's like these kids don't even know what happened back then, But I had to get training officers back then, so.
So, John, you
Yeah.
seem you're heavily involved as a firefighter right now. Then is that correct?
I still work my 9 shifts a month. Yep, my 24-hour shifts. Yep, I work tomorrow. So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
Yep, and I go on my 4-day. Nothing like it. Nothing like the 9 days a month. I can't beat that. I can still do sports and all my other stuff. So.
wow,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, that's
Yeah.
all the more reason. And obviously, we're looking forward to doing more and more broadcasts and keep this going. It's been a lot of fun talking on a lot of different levels. And we'll have a lot of our questions answered in the foreseeable future about some of the things.
I soon, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with that said, John, why don't we give everybody a chance to identify you and where they can find you and locate you? And we're just so delighted to have you on tonight's edition of the Sports Exchange. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, you can. I'm on all the social media, with the sports show on my Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram. When the show probably airs again, we'll be back on Comcast. We've kind of been in a slow hiatus because of the sports, so we've been doing all the other stuff. But yeah, I'm just here in Michigan, so you always find me here.
All right, George,
Social
go ahead.
media.
Yeah, I'm the author of a book on Detroit sports media called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, featuring Ernie Harwell, Ray Lane, Bud Lynch, Bruce Martin, Van Patrick, George Blaha, and all the greats like Scott Morganroth. Yes, Scott is featured in the book as well with Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors. And you can get the book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, at the South Florida Tribune website under About Me. They have a link there to the book. It's published by Arcadia, and you can also get it at Amazon. And you can reach me at DSBA2 anytime, or Eichorn@yahoo.com.
Very good.
And I have a signed copy of that book, by the way.
Oh, yes, John.
I do.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know you do. Thank you, John, and thank you, Scott.
Hey, listen, this is a broadcast that if Detroit Sports Media doesn't go ahead and put this on their website, as Gomer Pyle would say, shame, shame, shame. But meanwhile, if you want to hear the audio version of this broadcast, you can do so at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let me repeat that again, since everybody says I talk too fast, and they're right. Okay. So Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, where you get your podcasts. In terms of us on social media, follow us at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook, Instagram, you can like us and follow us there for South Florida Tribune. So Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune gets it done. Our YouTube channel, which there's no cost to subscribe it. You can subscribe to South Florida Tribune, no charge. All it costs you about 1/10 of a second of your life to hit subscribe, and you're good. Now I'll give you 6 reasons why you should go ahead and subscribe to it. Number 1, the Sports Exchange is on there. No Limits is on there. 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, Real and the Rare, Fantasy Football, South Florida Tribune podcast. We got podcasts for every different thing out there. So by all means, we encourage everybody to subscribe. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a section for Motor City Monitor, which allows the Detroit to South Florida connection to be alive and well here in the old South. Okay. We also have our media distribution partners that send us content. We also have our regular columnists that contribute, and more importantly, under the WSAN dropdown, you can find each and every one of our broadcasts as well. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Feel free to send myself, George, John, any comments, suggestions. We'll be more than happy to put them on the air and make mention of you. And finally, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth is an easy way to do it. I'll be more than happy to accept your invitation and look forward to getting to know you on that level as well. So guys, it's been a tremendous amount of fun having you on, all three of you, my buddies from Detroit Sports Media. So
Thank you.
I look forward to doing this more often. It really has been a lot of fun, and look forward to coming to Detroit, whether there's a Christmas party or not. There's no reason why three of us can't go out and get a bite to eat anyhow and have a good time, reminisce about new times, talk about tonight's broadcast, and create potential opportunities for every one of us to expand our platform. So
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I loved it. So,
it's been a lot of fun. So on a final note, I want to let everybody know, okay, please respect COVID-19. You know, you need to mask up, social distance, use common sense, and do all the necessary things to take precautions, because I don't care who you are, whether you're the president of the United States, Nick Saban, Dan Mullins, the University of Florida, head coach that's got hit with the virus, Les Miles, or whoever is out there, or the average individual. This virus doesn't care who the heck you are. They don't. Mask up and do everything necessary to try to be as cautious as possible. But yes, I'm wearing this Detroit Lions hat, certainly a focal point of the night. And if you want to find this broadcast, you can look under Lions on Fool's Gold with a question mark. We'll find out whether we're all a bunch of fools or whether or not there is a pulse for this team, TBD, as we say in our industry. So on behalf of John Thiede and George Eichorn, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth of Motor City Madmouth. Thanking you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. Until the next night, have a good week, folks.
all right, good seeing y'all.
Bye.